Last week, I went to take my 14-foot boat out for its initial ride, and my Mercury 2.5 horsepower outboard motor failed me. One of the people who commented when I posted something about that, whether I do the maintenance on that motor. I had to pause before I answered that question, because it's interesting how everybody looks at something like maintenance on anything differently. For example, this pair of clippers right here. There are some people who will say doing maintenance on it means putting a drop of oil in it. Some other people will periodically take the rubber handles off and scrub everything down, sharpen it up, lubricate it, clean the spring, do all those other kinds of things. Every one of those people will say, I maintain my tools properly. So I was thinking about how to craft my answer, and I answered it basically saying, I'm better than some and worse than others. The reason I bring this up is because lack of maintenance is really what got me in trouble with the little Mercury 2.5. But to really tell this story, I have to go back to what happened last week. The Mercury had been sitting all winter long. I wasn't sure if I had put in stabilizer or if I drained the fuel out of the carburetor. But when I went to start it, it started right up. So it started and it ran, and I let it run for about a minute or so, and everything seemed fine. So in my mind, that engine was ready to go.
She's a runner.
Fast forward a week later, I get out on the water, it starts, and it runs for about 1 minute. So when I got back from my little outing, I started it up.
Turn the choke off. Give it some gas.
And sure enough, it was doing the same thing. I decided to start with the easiest, simplest option, which is fuel. The fuel that I was running in this outboard engine could very well be a year old, and I was pretty certain that it was E10, fuel with ethanol in it. Unless I buy at the marina on the water across the creek, I have to buy E10. I can't get ethanol-free fuel. I disconnected the fuel tank and drained the old fuel out of the tank. I also cleaned out the inside of the tank, wiping it out, because I did see there was some bits of debris in the bottom of the tank. Debris could have been blocking the flow of fuel, I thought. The inside of that hose was not gummed up, was not blocked, and seemed to be working just fine. Put in brand new fuel and started to try to run the motor. Same problem. Might as well check the spark plug really quickly. Popped the cover off of that, pulled out the spark plug. I found it was gapped a little tight, actually. The plug looked in good condition. Regapped the plug, popped that back in there again. Let's see if cleaning the carburetor really quickly works. So one of the things that I discovered as I was looking at this is that you can actually drain the fuel out of the float bowl without removing anything like the cover from the engine or anything like that. There's no panels to have to be removed. You can just take a screwdriver, pull out one screw with a gasket on it, and drain the fuel out of the carburetor. I have never done that before with this engine. So this was a situation where even if I was thinking I was doing proper maintenance to winterize my engine, I really should be probably draining the fuel out of that float bowl in the winter, not just running the carburetor dry. So I popped the carburetor off, which came off very easily in this engine. It's a very simple, basic design. And I took off the float bowl, took apart a few other components, and took a look at it. Everything looked pretty good. I didn't see any gummy areas. I didn't see a lot of dirt and debris. So I sprayed cans of carburetor cleaner into those areas, inspected everything, put it back together, put it back on the engine, and tried to run it. That didn't work either. Still the exact same problem. So what I decided to do for my next step was take everything apart, soak the carburetor parts in the parts cleaner for the recommended amount of time, which I think is a couple hours. So I took the carburetor off again, took it completely apart, taking out things like the little jets and the needle valves and all these types of things. So once the carburetor was off and soaking, I thought to myself, I should just go ahead and replace that hose that runs from the tank to the carburetor. I looked around my garage and I did have some leftover fuel line from when I was working on one of my old outboards. And once I assembled the carburetor, put the new fuel hose on there, put everything back together, it's time for another test here on the old test tank. Let's open up our fuel cap, our vent cap. Let's turn on our fuel. So, we've got new fuel, higher octane, mixed with stable and the oil. Got this vented, I could hear it vent. Got a new fuel hose. We've cleaned the tank, cleaned the valve, got a new fuel hose running all the way to the carburetor. We've taken apart the carburetor, soaked it, cleaned it. There's our choke. Pull this up to, it's probably the starting spot right there. Got our safety lanyard on. Yes. And let's see what we can do here. Alright, we started and we shut off. So, getting fuel with the carburetor, we know that, right? The engine just sits here, runs at all different RPMs for as long as I need it to. And as I said at the beginning of this video, it goes back to maintenance. While on one hand, I'm thinking I'm doing a pretty decent job of maintaining that outboard, clearly I wasn't doing enough. If I was running ethanol-free fuel, maybe I wouldn't have had any of these problems at all. Then again, maybe I would have had the problem because I don't drain the float bowl. So, my maintenance routine is going to change a little bit with this outboard going forward. I'm going to make every effort to continue to run ethanol-free fuel through there, and at the end of the season, I am going to drain the float bowl as well as running the carburetor dry from the fuel tank. So, thanks so much for watching. I'm going to get out on the water very soon again. We've had kind of a bit of a monsoon here the last few days, so it hasn't been ideal for boating, but I hope to be out in the water again very soon. Till then, check out this video right here. YouTube's suggesting this one for you.